Welcome to the Business Summer Series. I'm Elysse Morgan. Well, during 2020, Australia hit a grim milestone: 1 million people out of work. In this program, we look at what could be the biggest and longest lasting legacy from COVID, including the ghosts of recessions past, why pandemic unemployment casualties could haunt the economy for a decade to come. And looking down the recession time tunnel, it was men who bore the brunt in the 90s, why the COVID downturn is hitting women hard now. Australia was the global pin-up for economic growth, enjoying 29 years without recession. That winning streak, of course, came to an end spectacularly this year. By April, the frightening impact of the global pandemic was becoming apparent. Countries around the world were slamming into varying levels of shutdown to deal with the virus. At home, the Reserve Bank governor was warning the country was facing deep economic challenges.
The result of both the restrictions and this uncertainty is that over the first half of 2020, we are likely to experience the biggest contraction in national output and national income that we've witnessed since the 1930s.
Luckily, the worst-case scenario did not play out, but we still entered a technical recession when growth contracts for 2 consecutive quarters. So what did that mean for a nation which has been enjoying a very long run of success? Well, in the first of our 3-part series on the recession, policymakers and business leaders recall the impact of the 90s recession that we had to have and the challenges of the one we didn't see coming. Here's Daniel Ziffer.
The Australian economy has been hit with the coronavirus sledgehammer.
What was I thinking, really? Holy crap, like this is the end of the world.
In Melbourne's Italian restaurant strip, Lygon Street, Eric Pace has been mixing flavours at his parents' gelato shop for 30 years.
In 1991, I was all of 21 years old, or thereabouts, and I was working here.
Decades on, memories remain of how difficult the early 90s were.
High interest rates, losing houses, more that sort of side of things. Where now it's a different story.
Anyone under the age of 40 will barely remember the last recession. It means 2 quarters of negative growth, but it's much deeper than that simple definition. For the people who were there, the memories are fresh and the parallels are emerging, even though this recession is occurring for very different reasons to the last one. Everyone saw 1991 coming.
Inflation that was running at between 7 and 10%, and unemployment which shot up to well over 11%.
Formerly an investment banker, Graham Samuel was developing competition policy as the 1991 recession hit. Then there were sky-high interest rates. Now, central banks across the globe have little firepower to jumpstart the economy because interest rates are at record lows.
We have 2 levers. One's the monetary lever, monetary levers of the interest rates. The second is the fiscal lever, which is tax and government spending. And I said that the monetary lever had shortened to a short stub, and now it's virtually vanished.
Holding the lever in 1991, Professor Bob Gregory on the board of the Reserve Bank of Australia.
It was extremely difficult, and it was much more difficult than most people remember.
Hindsight makes things clearer, but the most striking parallels are how little certainty that leaders, businesses and everyday people have about what's ahead.
So the uncertainty at the beginning, which is the downturn, gets replaced by the uncertainty of the upturn. And it's a characteristic of all crises.
Diane Smith-Gander sits on the board of one of our biggest retailers, Wesfarmers. When the last recession hit, she was working for the chief executive of Westpac.
The topic of conversation at the barbecue was your mortgage. Mortgage interest rates were going absolutely crazy and people were really stressed as a result.
The connecting factor from the 90s to now? Rocketing unemployment and no clear sign of it coming down.
When you don't have a confident set of consumers, and their confidence does come from having a secure job, you don't have a confident business sector. And that was exactly what we saw.
The unemployment rate hit 7.1% in May, but even the government concedes that doesn't count the whole problem. The ABS estimates 2.3 million people, 1 in 5 workers, either lost their job or had reduced hours in recent months.
So the economic cost of this recession might be very similar to 1991, but who bears the cost in the labour market could be quite different.
We came into the year with low growth and low business confidence globally, and sky-high household debt locally. Now we have new problems.
We've got to remember this. This is not a recession in the normal form of the word.
Recessions normally expose structural problems in the economy, like high interest rates or inflation, leading to businesses contracting and high unemployment. This time it's different. This year we shut the economy to prevent a health crisis. Tomorrow, the promise of a V-shaped recovery. Can we apply the lessons from the 90s to build a better, faster response?
Danzifer there. Well, what to do if you're a central banker in a recession? The RBA confirmed in July that Australia was in the worst slump since the Great Depression. As Stephen Long reports, the history of recessions past suggests high unemployment could be the legacy for years to come.
The year was 1982, as factory workers walked out the gate for the last time.
In an economic recession, with unemployment running at 10%, retrenchment, redundancy and early retirement are just different words for the same reality. No job and not much chance of getting one ever again.
1974, another recession, the same terrible story.
Just got our notice, We're pretty sad.
This is the second time that I've been retrenched, and I have tried everywhere to get a job.
Do you think you can live on the dole money?
No chance in the world. I've got to pay $33 a week rent. What chance have I got?
The accounts do show that Australia's in a recession. This is a recession that Australia had to have.
Despite the past 30 years of growth, Australia's history is punctuated by recessions. What lessons do they hold?
What we know from Australian history and from the history of other recessions around the world is that recessions hit fast and they take a long time to recover from. So while the unemployment rate spikes very quickly, while GDP falls very quickly, it's years, sometimes a decade, before we see the labour market getting back to the kind of condition it was in before the recessions hit.
Businesses don't survive recessions, and the people who are attached to those businesses that fail have deep personal as well as economic loss, and it takes years and years for them often to rebuild.
Nikki Hutley was in the early phase of her economics career in 1990 and 1991 when the last recession hit.
A sobering lesson for me as a brand new economist back in 91, as we started to come out, we got the first positive set of GDP numbers, and I made some snappy comment to a journalist, 6 months from now people will be saying, recession, what recession?
The last quarter of 1990 saw bankruptcies around the country skyrocket by 56%.
How wrong she was. Unemployment, which devastated lives, did not return to pre-recession levels until the next decade. And the early 90s recession was far shallower than the one we're in now. In the recession of the early 1990s, the economy shrank by less than 1.5%. This time round, we're looking at a fall of 3, 4, maybe 5 times that. And when the economy goes over a cliff that big, it takes a long time to climb back up again.
We've just seen the economy fall, Treasury suggests, by up to 8% coming up in the June quarter. When you fall off a cliff like that, the rate at which we climb back up the mountain is far less important than how far we've actually fallen.
With fears that a looming fiscal cliff, when the government support is due to be wound back, could make the recession longer and deeper.
And I'm very worried about what happens in September. Pre-COVID, we were already in a really weak economy. So the idea that we're going back to some utopian growth rate in the near future is just that. It's unrealistic optimism. Of course, we can get back there over time, but it's going to take time.
The current recession is history in the making. There's no certainty how long and deep it will be, but there will be no snapback to business as usual.
Stephen Long there. Well, all recessions take a heavy toll on workers, business and the economy. But the COVID crisis has been different. It was male workers who bore the brunt of the recession in the 90s. Now it's sectors of the economy dominated by females who've taken the hardest hit. In the final part of our three-part series, we've sought out experts who were there in the last recession and using the benefit of hindsight to chart a way forward. Here's Dan Ziffer again.
A pandemic with a swift global shutdown, closing borders and stopping public movement to prevent viral spread. We put the economy into a medically induced coma.
What we've got here is a contraction that's been caused by specific action of government to deal with the health crisis.
Now we have to wake the patient safely.
So jobs are always the thing.
I think the sun's going to come out for all of us when it comes out. That's the way I see it. Yeah, I'm an optimist.
I think the hard period hasn't arrived yet from an economic policy point of view.
Professor Bob Gregory was on the board of the Reserve Bank during Australia's last recession in 1991 and the recovery.
What we were doing in, say, year one was having implications for employment year 3, year 4.
That recession hit male full-time workers particularly hard. Many never recovered. This downturn is culling jobs and industries dominated by women, including retail and tourism and part-time work. Businesswoman Diane Smith-Gander said the government's big-ticket response, boosting unemployment benefits and introducing a wage subsidy, offer a lifeline.
The fact that JobKeeper and JobSeeker were the first things out of the gate and the levels that they came at made me feel that someone in Treasury has a really good memory. Because that initial focus said to me, yep, they get it is about maintaining employment.
Public servant Graham Samuel agrees.
Unemployment is the critical factor.
Australia moved out of recession quickly in 1991, but the recovery took years as businesses, spooked by the crash, refused to put on workers. That persistently high unemployment rate created its own problems in the housing market and crushing consumer confidence.
Now, if I go back to 1990 and 92, we peaked at about 11.2%, but it took us 3 years to get back to 8.3%. And that in itself says that there's a big difference.
Some of the government's long-held views, like the importance of running budget surpluses, have been jettisoned in the emergency.
The government, under the leadership of Scott Morrison and Josh Frydenberg, have thrown away the ideology already.
But as the crisis wears on, there's concern.
When the recovery starts, then the old views will start coming back and people will start thinking about, oh, we've got to get budgets back into balance.
And no time to waste.
The lesson is just get moving. Let's not sit around and talk about this for too long. Let's recognise that we've been given an opportunity to change a lot of our business models, to have a real good look at the way we're working.
Eric Pace was making gelato during the 1991 recession, and he's still churning it out.
It's like Armageddon. Like you could walk in March, April, you could walk down Logan Street in the nude, I reckon no one would see you. Yeah, it was just that dead.
This is not your average recession. With most of Victoria locked down again, you can see how coronavirus spreads uncertainty as well. Without a vaccine, there's no end in sight to restrictions necessary to maintain public health, meaning any recovery will be unsteady.
I'm hoping and I'm positive that people are going to start coming out lights at the end of the tunnel. As I said, the sun's going to come out and it's all going to be good in the long run.
But how long to run?
It could be argued we are already starting to see a bounce back. The data, particularly unemployment data late in 2020, could indicate that. But there's no doubt the recession hangover will be lasting for a long while yet. Over summer, our reporters are bringing you all the business and economics news you need online. Head to the ABC News website and click on the business page. And the business program will return on Feb 1. See you then. I'm Elysse Morgan. Thanks for watching.